Hi everyone. As part of this problem, we have three input tables, that is customer, orders and products. So the first table is customer. In this table, we have two columns, that is ID, that is the ID of the customer, name, that is the name of the customer. So this is the first input table. The second input table is orders, that is the orders that are placed by the customer. So first of all, we have ID, that is the order ID. Then we have customer ID, that is the customer who have placed the order. And finally, we have the product ID, that is the product for which the customer has placed the order. So here we have details of customer and the product that the customer has ordered. So this is the second table. The third table is regarding the products. So in this table, again we have two columns. First is the ID, which is the ID of the product, and then we have the name column, which is the name of the product. So basically we are talking about cell phones here, and the requirement here is we need to identify all the customer who bought iPhone and Samsung cell phones, but they did not buy Xiomi cell phone. So this is the requirement here, that we only need to identify the customer who purchased only iPhone and Samsung and not Xiomi. So as part of this output, we will get this customer, that is John. So like if we see here, the customer ID for John is 1. So John has placed two orders, and that is product ID 1 and 2. And 1 and 2 are of iPhone and Samsung. So he has purchased only these two items and not Xiaomi. So that's why he is in the output as required. We have another customer, that is Sam, with customer ID 4. Now, if we see his purchases, he has purchased all the three cell phones, that is belonging to iPhone, Samsung and Xiaomi. But since our requirement only requires customer who purchased these two and not Xiaomi, he is not reported in the output. And also if other customers who have purchased only say iPhone or only say Samsung, even they will not be reported. So the whole idea is we need to report the customers who bought iPhone and Samsung, both of these, but not Xiaomi. So hope the problem statement is clear. So let's get started and solve this problem using these three input tables. Okay, so what we will do first is we need to identify that from the orders table. So let's start with the orders table. Let's give the Elias as O. And what we will do is in the orders table, we have the product ID, that is this column. So we will identify which product this refers to, whether it is iPhone or whether it is Samsung. So that we will determine first. So let's go ahead and do that. So we will do a inner join here with the products table and give the alias as P, and the joining condition will be on the product ID and ID of the product table. For now, let's fetch all the columns from the orders table and the name of the product from the products table. So let's run and see the output. So as we can see, we have identified which are the product names for the given product ID. So now what we need to do is, for every customer, we need to determine how many Samsung or how many iPhone they have purchased or how many Xiaomi they have purchased. So based on that, we can make a decision of how many items this customer has purchased and whether this criteria is satisfied for any customer or not. So that is what we are going to do here. So once we have this data, what we are going to do is we are going to do a grouping here. So we will do the grouping based on the customer ID. So this is the customer ID we have. So what we are going to do is we are going to do a group by here. So group by on the customer ID. And basically what we will do is, as we see in the name column, we have the product name. So we will count out how many items are there for each of these categories. So for that, what we will do is we will use the sum function and we will use a case condition that will check for this product names. So say if it is iPhone, then the count will be 1. end. So this will give us the iPhone count. So note that we have not given the else condition. If we have not given else condition, by default, null will be considered. So this will give us the iPhone count. On similar lines, let's take the count for other two categories as well. That is Samsung and Xiomi. So this will be Samsung count and this will be Xiomi. So for every customer, now we will have the details of how many of each item that they have purchased. That is how many iPhones that they have purchased or how many Samsung they have purchased. That details we will have here. And to deal with null, we could also have, like we see, we have not given the else condition. So null is populated. So if required, we can give else condition to populate 0 in each of the cases to avoid the nulls here. Okay, so now we have given the else part. So with this, if we run, wherever we are seeing nulls, it should show 0. So as we see, now we have determined for every customer how many iPhones they have purchased, how many Samsung they have purchased, and how many Xiomi they have purchased. So once we have this count, the problem is straightforward. We can simply look out for the customers who have at least count 1 in iPhone and Samsung category and 0 count in Xiomi category. So that is what we need to do. So here we could have added this as part of a CTE and then use a where clause to filter out the required criteria condition. But another way is, since we are using the aggregation, we can use the having clause here itself, and based on that, we can identify this required criteria. So for example, this is the iPhone count. So we can say this is greater than equal to 1. Similarly, for other counts, that is Samsung, we require the count should be at least 1. So greater than equal to 1. And finally, for Xiomi, the count should be 0. So that check we will add here. So with this, we will add the required filter criteria. So now we have identified the customer who has purchased iPhone and Samsung and not purchased Xiomi. The last part that remains is identifying the customer name. So that we can do by joining it with the customers table. So what we can do here is we can do a inner join. So let's do a inner join with the customers table. And this will be joining based on the ID of the customer and the customer ID of the orders table. And with that, we will get the customer name as well. So let's add that here as customer name. Okay. And there is a conflict in the, since we have the name column in both customer and products, that's why there is a ambiguity here. So to resolve that, we can specify that this column is coming from products table. So now let's run and see the output, whether if we are able to, and here as well, let's resolve the ambiguity by specifying that these columns are coming from products table. Okay. So now let's run and see the output if we are able to obtain the names. Okay, customer name is invalid in the select list because it is not contained in aggregation. So let's add this in the group by clause. So apart from all the aggregation function like say sum, max, min, all the other columns that are present needs to be added as part of group by. So that is what we have done here. Now this issue should be resolved. Let's run and see the output. So as we can see, we have identified the customer ID and customer name along with the counts. Now, if the count fields are not required, we can remove these columns and just keep the customer ID and customer name as part of the output. So as we can see, we have obtained the required output. We have identified the customers who have purchased only two categories, that is iPhone and Samsung, and not the Xiomi. We could have also solved this problem using joins, wherein we could have like iPhone category separated, Samsung category separated, and Xiomi category separated. After that, we can perform the joins to obtain this output. But this is one way we can solve the problem. So if you have any alternative way, feel free to edit in the comments. Okay, so let's do a quick summary of how we have gone ahead solving this problem. So what we did is, first of all, we started with the orders table. We did an inner join with the products table to identify the product names. So since we had only product ID in the orders table, we were not aware whether it is belonging to iPhone, Samsung or Xiomi. So that's why we did an inner join with the products to get the product names. And this was the joining condition on the product ID and ID from the products table. So once we did that join, we identified what is the product name. After that, what we have done is we have done a grouping based on the customer ID, and we have checked if the name that we have derived, if it is an iPhone, then we have taken the count as 1. Similarly for Samsung, a separate count, and similarly for Xiaomi, a separate count. So this way we have built 3 separate aggregation for getting the 3 counts for each of the categories. We have checked if the count is greater than equal to 1, that is, there is at least one item that is purchased in the Samsung and iPhone category, and no item has been purchased in the Xiaomi category. So this way we were able to check on this criteria. Finally, to obtain the customer name, we did an inner join with the customer table to fetch the customer name. So this way we derived the required columns and solved this problem. So the create table and insert statement will be added in the description. Please go ahead and solve this problem as a practice from your end as well. And if you found this video useful, please like
Like,
it. If you
comment,
have not
and
yet subscribed the channel,
subscribe.
please subscribe and please provide your feedback in the comments. Thank you.